Welcome back, dreamers. Tonight, we continue Harry's second year at Hogwarts, a year shaped not only by secrets and shadows, but by rhythm. A rhythm that stretches from deep beneath the castle all the way to the hardwood courts of Chicago, where greatness moves in silence. In this chapter, you'll follow Harry as he begins to sense a new pattern underfoot. The court of motion stirs once more. A diary begins to whisper. A serpent watches from the pipes. And far away, Michael Jordan is redefining what it means to lead, not through flash, but through flow. But if this is your first time joining this story, I recommend starting with part 1 of Harry Potter and the Secret NBA Dynasty. That's where the play begins, the rhythm returns, and the dream opens its eyes for the first time. You'll find it linked in the description or on my channel in the full Hogwarts X Balls crossover playlist. Get cozy, because part 2 begins right where the bounce left off. Harry had grown taller over the summer, though he hadn't noticed it. It was Aunt Petunia who gasped when he bumped his head against the low kitchen lamp. He didn't mind. He was used to strange things happening around him, and this one felt more like a sign than an accident. In the quiet nights at Privet Drive, when the moon painted soft shadows across his bedroom floor, Harry found himself moving. Not restlessly, but deliberately. Pivoting. Breathing. Spinning on the balls of his feet, as if responding to a game no one else could see. The stone, still wrapped in cloth in his sock drawer, called to him like a memory he hadn't finished dreaming. He didn't speak of it. But he knew. The court of motion had never left him. It was late August when the first vision came. He drifted off reading Flying with the Cannons and found himself standing barefoot on a wooden court. The lights were low, golden. Empty bleachers rose into the shadows above. And there, at center court, stood the figure. Familiar, calm, moving without wasted effort. Michael Jordan. He didn't speak. He just dribbled, slowly, each bounce echoing through the space like a heartbeat. Then he passed the ball to Harry, clean, direct. Harry caught it. It was warm. He turned. The court beneath them shimmered, transformed into stone. Pipes. Shadows. A whisper in a language he didn't understand. He's coming. Harry woke with a start. Outside, owls called across the dark. And from somewhere deep in the house, the faint sound of bouncing, 1, 2, pause, came and went like a dream. Platform 9 3/4 was just as he remembered it, though this time, something clung to the air. Not just autumn. Anticipation. Ron and Hermione were waiting. Ginny trailed just behind, quieter than the others, clutching a tattered journal to her chest. Excited? Hermione asked. More curious, Harry admitted. Why? He hesitated, then shrugged. Feels like something's moving already. Ron groaned. Blimey, not again. But Harry meant it. He could feel it, beneath the bricks, beneath the rails. Motion. Like a court warming before the whistle. On the train, Harry sat by the window and opened the old cloth pouch. The stone rested inside, unchanged at first glance. But when he held it to the light, he noticed something new. A hairline rune had appeared, thin, winding like a snake. A second had branched off it, looping, curling, forming a shape he'd seen once before in the Hall of Statues. A triangle. No, not just a triangle. A triangle with motion. Far across the ocean, in a packed stadium in Chicago, the Bulls tipped off the 1992-93 season. Jordan had been silent in the locker room before the game, more focused than usual. He moved differently now. Less flash. More edge. Phil Jackson watched from the sideline. Triangle, he said softly. Always in motion. Jordan looked up at the scoreboard. Then back down. He bounced the ball once. It echoed. And halfway across the world, Harry Potter blinked. and felt it. Back at Hogwarts, the castle loomed familiar, but wrong. The staircases felt sluggish. The portraits whispered louder. Even the sorting hat seemed hesitant. And on the very first night, as they returned to Gryffindor Tower, Ginny turned sharply in the corridor, her journal clutched tight. "What is it?" Ron asked. But she shook her head. Harry looked back. Just for a moment, he swore he saw something, a ripple in the stone, like heat rising from the floor. A pulse. A bounce. Then it was gone. That night, Harry stood alone in the common room. He placed the stone on the floor and traced the first rune with his wand. The air held its breath. He stepped into the pattern. A bounce. A turn. A slide step like the ones he saw in his dreams. And as he reached the center of the old rug, the fire behind him flickered high. He stopped. Listened. From the pipes above, faint as falling dust, came a voice. The chamber stirs. And the court remembers. The next few days passed like smoke curling through cracks, soft, twisting, directionless. Hogwarts was unchanged on the surface. Lessons resumed. First years fumbled with levitation charms. Peeves was as chaotic as ever. But beneath it all was a hum, a low, wordless pulse, like the echo of footsteps down a corridor you'd just left. Harry felt it in his chest more than his ears. It wasn't fear. It was anticipation. In herbology, Professor Sprout led the class into the outer greenhouses to examine snarevine, a creeping magical root that responded to sound. Sensitive to cadence, she explained, adjusting her wide hat. The roots can mirror movement. They're often found near battlegrounds, or places of deep, repeating magic. Hermione's hand shot up. Why repeating? Magic remembers, Sprout said. Especially when footsteps walk in rhythm. Harry froze. Beneath his boots, the soil curved into an odd pattern, a curling S-shape wrapped around a loop. He bent down and gently cleared a patch with his gloved hand. There, pressed into the mud, was a rune. Not just a rune. A formation. 2 forward lines. A central pivot. A wide arc. Like a half-court. He stood slowly, scanning the overgrowth. They were standing in a play. Sprout noticed him staring and smiled. This greenhouse was built over the old dueling lanes, she said, almost absent-mindedly. Before Hogwarts even had formal courts. Some of the magic still in the roots. Harry didn't respond. He didn't need to. He already knew. That night, he dreamt of a practice court, empty, except for one shadow beneath a lone overhead lamp. Michael Jordan stood near the sideline, bouncing a ball once, then twice. He pointed toward the corner. A space opened. Harry stepped into it. He didn't know how he knew the movement, but he did. Pivot. Back step. Float right. The ball came to him like a whisper. He caught it mid-stride and turned. Jordan was already walking away, the echo of his footsteps folding into the stone. Harry woke with the rhythm still moving in his fingers. In the common room the next morning, Hermione handed him a book she'd checked out without asking, Foundational Formations in Ancient Magical Games. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a charcoal rubbing on page 34. It showed for interlocked rune paths, curved and diagonal, surrounding a central dot. "It's a ritual movement grid," she explained. "Used in pre-dueling training and early magical dance." Ron yawned. "Looks like a Quidditch pitch." Harry shook his head. "No. It's too tight." He traced it with his finger. "It's a basketball court." Across the Atlantic, Jordan led the Bulls through a shaky October. The team had dropped 2 early games, close ones. Pippin's minutes were up. Horace Grant looked fatigued. And in the press, people whispered, "Burnout." But something shifted in the third game. Jordan stopped forcing shots. He let the rhythm find him. Late in the fourth, with two defenders collapsing, he dribbled left, then snapped a pass backwards, behind his head, without looking. B.J. Armstrong caught it and hit the three. Phil Jackson just nodded. They weren't chasing the rhythm anymore. They were becoming it again. Back at Hogwarts, Harry sat alone beneath the portrait of Ulrich the Odd, who for once was quiet. He laid out the sketch of the rooms from the greenhouse beside the original court of motion diagram from last year. Something clicked. The patterns matched. Not in shape, in tempo. They weren't diagrams. They were instructions. Outside the tower window, the leaves blew in looping, shifting spirals. Orange, gold, and crimson danced over the grounds like players in formation. Harry pressed his hand to the stone floor. And from deep below, where the pipes ran like veins, he felt the pulse again. A dribble. A slide. A cut. The chamber wasn't just a place. It was a choreographed warning. And somewhere inside it, magic was moving. There was something unnatural about the quiet in Hogwarts that week. Even Filch, usually prone to muttering threats at students and inanimate objects alike, walked the corridors with a tense hush. It wasn't fear, or not yet. It was the kind of silence that lives in the breath before a whistle. Everyone could feel it. Something was about to start. Or maybe it had already started, and they were just now catching up. Harry noticed Ginny moving differently. She had always been shy, but now she seemed drained, distracted. Her eyes flicked to shadows that weren't there. Once, Harry spotted her in the Great Hall at breakfast, staring not at her toast but at the leather-bound diary on the table beside her. It looked plain. Worn. But it hummed. Not with sound. With memory. Later that day, Harry passed her in the corridor near the statue of Gunhilda of Gorsmo. She jumped when he said hello, clutching the diary as if protecting it from something unseen. He didn't press. But that night, he opened the pouch beneath his mattress and pulled out the stone again. It was pulsing. The stone had never done that before, not since the night the court vanished below him in year one. It throbbed with a slow, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat or a bouncing ball just out of reach. Harry turned it over. What had once been a smooth, blank surface now bore three faint lines. Two curved outward like wings. And one carved sharp through them, a cut. It wasn't a wand movement. It was a crossover. Not the kind you learn from Oliver Wood or practice with a broomstick. The kind that happens at the elbow, when a defender lunges left and you're already gone. That night, the dream came again. Only this time, it wasn't on a court. It was underground. Pipes stretched endlessly in both directions. Shadows moved like memory along the walls. At the far end, a soft echo. Not footsteps. Dribbles. And at the very edge of the corridor, just before it fell into blackness, stood Michael Jordan. Not moving. Not speaking. Just watching. Behind him, the pipes turned into arcs. The floor split into rooms. The shadows leaned forward like an audience frozen in anticipation. Harry took a step. Jordan pointed, not at him, but beneath him. Harry looked down. There was a circle. With a name inside it. T.M. Riddle. He woke gasping, the stone warm in his fist. Across the room, Hermione was still asleep, books stacked beside her bed. He tiptoed down to the common room, lit only by the dying fire. The court wasn't visible there anymore. But Harry didn't need to see it. He could feel it. He set the stone down, placed one foot at the invisible top of the key, and stepped left, then right, then back, drawing the path of a triangle. The stone flared. Images burst briefly behind his eyes. Ginny writing in the diary. The basilisk's eye, huge, lidless, reflecting stone. A hand drawing runes on a wall in thick red ink. A boy, not Voldemort, not yet. Watching from a shadowed bench with a ball balanced perfectly on one fingertip. And above it all, the whisper of motion. Not all passes go forward. Elsewhere, far from the castle, Jordan watched tape. The Bulls were 3-2. Not bad. Not great. The media was asking questions about fatigue. About age. About hunger. He didn't answer them. He watched quietly as his younger self moved across the screen, 1991, 1992, 1993. Each play. Each pass. Each decision made without words. Phil Jackson entered the room, said nothing, sat beside him. They both knew. Sometimes, to move forward, you had to pass into the past. Back at Hogwarts, Ginny passed Harry in the library and dropped something, a note, not a diary page. He picked it up. One word. Help. And beneath it, a tiny, faint triangle drawn in ink. Not perfect, but familiar. He looked up. She was already gone. The stone hummed in his pocket. The chamber was opening. But the play hadn't even begun. Not yet. The hall was empty. That should have made it safe. It didn't. Harry moved slowly through the fifth-floor corridor, his footsteps softened by dust and old stone. The windows here were tall and narrow, letting in just enough light to stretch shadows across the floor like warning lines. He knew the corridor well, he'd passed it dozens of times last year without a second thought. But this time, he wasn't walking through it. He was reading it. Each statue stood not randomly, but in formation. 12 in all. Human, animal, hybrid, blank. Some looked heroic. Others wore chipped helmets and broken wands. But when viewed from above, which Harry imagined, tracing their placement with his wand, the shapes were unmistakable. Not a hallway. A diagram. He placed his hand flat against the wall beside the first statue. Cold. Uneven. He whispered the activation rune, one he'd felt pulsing from the stone, though he still didn't fully understand it. Motus. Nothing happened. He stepped forward, pivoted left, then back. The third statue's base glowed. Just for a second. A gold flicker beneath the stone. Harry's pulse quickened. He tried again. Step. Turn. Slide. Plant. Another statue glowed. Then another. And in that moment, the corridor stopped being a corridor. It became a court. Hermione found him there 20 minutes later, parchment in hand, copying angles, measuring distances. "What are you doing?" she asked, gently but curiously. "Following a play," Harry said. Hermione looked around. "It's just statues." "No," he said, "it's a set. This is a possession. Like a series of passes before a final shot." Hermione didn't argue. She only crouched beside him and began tracing the runes she could see. "These were carved by wandless magic," she murmured. "You don't chisel these. You place them with intention." Harry nodded. "Like setting a screen," he said. Hermione blinked. "What?" He smiled. "Never mind." That night, in the common room, he moved through the diagram again. Feet sliding over the old rug, barely making a sound. The basketball sat untouched by the fire, casting a long shadow on the floor. As he reached the pivot point, the place where a defender would collapse if they expected a left move, he changed direction mid-step. Just like in the vision. Just like Jordan. The stone in his pocket burned hot. In his dream, Jordan stood on the Hogwarts court. Not the NBA one. This one. Pillars rose into the torchlit darkness. The court gleamed under a thin layer of mist. He didn't move this time. He waited. Harry stepped forward. Jordan pointed toward the three-point line. But there was no line. Just the floor. Until Harry stepped into it, and the court appeared beneath him. Runes. Arcs. Cut marks. Shot lanes. Old magic, dressed as strategy. Jordan nodded. And vanished. Back in the real Hogwarts, a suit of armor creaked to life as Harry passed. But it didn't raise its sword. It bowed. Ever so slightly. Harry turned, stunned. At the base of its pedestal, someone, or something, had etched a number. 23. Elsewhere in Chicago, Jordan cut through the key with no hesitation, drawing a defender and dropping a no-look pass behind him to Scottie Pippen. It landed perfectly in rhythm. 3-point shot. Timeout called. Phil Jackson didn't even get up. He leaned back and closed his eyes. Because when movement is true, there's no need to speak. Back at Hogwarts, Harry stood in the dark corridor. The statues were silent again. But the echoes of their placements filled the space with invisible structure. And deep below them, in the pipes that had not yet hissed, something was shifting. Coiling. Waiting. Watching the court take form. The sound started on a Wednesday. It came between classes, after a Drizzly Charms lesson and before lunch. A strange, low hiss, not loud enough to call attention, but sharp, and just near enough to the edge of hearing to feel real. Harry froze at the base of the staircase. The corridor behind him had gone still. And for just a second, in that breath between bells, he could hear it. Cell slide, a hiss, step step step, SLSSSSS. Not words. Not quite. A pattern. The first victim came that afternoon. Colin Creevey, camera still in hand, was found stiff as stone outside the hospital wing. His eyes frozen wide. His fingers clenched around the shutter release. Professor McGonagall closed off half the floor. Students were shuffled to common rooms. Dumbledore was silent. But Harry knew. This wasn't just a magical accident. It was part of a sequence. A defender removed from the court. A pass intercepted before it could be made. Harry sat on the steps of the empty common room that evening, the enchanted basketball in his lap. He traced the newest rune. It looked like a claw mark over a pivot circle. Disruption. The dream that night came without transition. No corridor. No room. Just a court, bare, clean, glowing under soft magical light. The runes pulsed dimly with each imagined step. And there, half in shadow, stood Jordan again. He had no ball this time. Only a wand. He didn't use it. Instead, he moved. Harry watched. One pivot. One turn. Two defenders collapsed from the shadows. Jordan moved sideways, without losing rhythm. Then backward. Then through. Harry tried to follow. He stumbled. Jordan offered no hand. Only a look. Feel the pressure, he said. But never carry it. Then he vanished. The next day, Harry went back to the Hall of Statues. But he didn't walk the play. He ran it. Stepped to the knight. Cut across the lion. Backdoor through the broken angel. The statues lit as he passed, not gold this time, but red. Alert! The court had sensed it too. Something unnatural had entered the pattern. Hermione returned from the library with 2 books and a theory. Basilisks, she whispered, laying the page open. They move by feel. By vibration. They're blind in darkness, but if something moves, they find it. Like a defender watching your hips, Harry said quietly. Hermione blinked. I suppose, yes. If you feint too far, they commit. She narrowed her eyes. "Are you comparing a basilisk to a defender?" Harry shrugged. "Kind of." He spent the next few nights walking corridors, marking echo spots. Hold breath. Then through the narrow archway, just as a shimmer passed behind him. The air burned cold for a second. Then it was gone. He collapsed, breathing hard, pulse in sync with the ball in his pocket. When he looked down at the enchanted basketball later, a new rune had formed at the seam. A fang. Set between two mirrored footsteps. It didn't mean danger. It meant pressure. Harry pressed it gently. And for a moment, he felt the court beneath him. And the court remembered. Everything was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that makes you feel at peace. The kind that settles like dust after something breaks. After the wind goes still and the players have left the court. The attacks had doubled. Justin Finch-Fletchley and nearly headless Nick, both found stiff as stone. Then it was Penelope Clearwater. Then Hermione. Hermione. The person who had helped him decode every rune, every step, every angle, reduced to stillness. She'd been holding a small mirror in one hand. That was the only clue. Even her parchment had frozen mid-sentence. The castle dimmed after that. Not magically. Emotionally. Classes shortened. Patrols doubled. Fear became the new rhythm of the school. And Harry, for all his movement, felt stuck. His enchanted basketball, once warm, humming with potential, sat cold in his trunk. The stone didn't pulse. The ring on his finger, still bearing the curved rune of flow, now felt too heavy, like it belonged to someone else. Without Hermione, the court made less sense. The plays were broken. The team was scattered. And for the first time, Harry understood what it meant to lose momentum. The dreams changed too. They weren't of courts anymore. They were of pipes. Cold, wet, twisting like veins beneath a wounded beast. The shadows moved differently now. Not with grace. With hunger. Jordan was still there, barely. Always at the edge of vision. But instead of running plays, he stood still, arms crossed, watching from far above the rafters, like a coach waiting to see if his player could remember the plan on his own. Harry walked the corridors alone. He couldn't do plays anymore, not without Hermione's precision, Ron's grounding laughter, or even Ginny's nervous, brave questions. So instead, he listened. Not to voices. To silence. He began charting which hallways echoed which steps. Which corners stole breath. Where motion slowed for no reason. Each of these he marked with chalk, small dots shaped like bounce arcs. In time, a pattern emerged. A spiral. Not inward. Around. It wasn't random. The chamber, whatever it was rotating. The attacks weren't just spaced. They were sequenced. One night, in the quiet, he took the stone from his trunk again. Cold. Faintly cracked. As if the magic inside it was trying to breathe but had run out of space. He set it on the floor. Sat cross-legged in front of it. And didn't move. For nearly 20 minutes, he sat completely still. Then, slowly, he raised one foot. He let it hover. He moved it in the outline of a curl screen, around a defender, sweep left, slide low, flare to the side. The stone pulsed. Not bright. Just once. Like a sigh. The next morning, Ginny passed him in the hall. She didn't speak. But he saw it, her hands trembling, red ink smudged across her cuffs. She wasn't just afraid. She was trying to warn him. And she was running out of time. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Jordan led the Bulls into the All-Star break. The media pressed him, his age, his focus, his ability to lead again. But in every game, his passes became crisper. His fadeaways tighter. His patience deeper. Not flashy. Deliberate. Like he'd stopped chasing dominance and instead became the structure that let the rest of the team move. Phil Jackson said it to the press once. Sometimes the game slows down not because it's dying, but because it's preparing. Back at Hogwarts, Harry sat again in the common room. Not playing. Not casting. Just remembering. Every movement Hermione had charted. Every rune she had drawn. Every lesson she had helped him feel, not just here. The court of motion wasn't a single court. It was anywhere rhythm returned to meaning. And if the momentum had been petrified, then it was Harry's turn to set the next screen. When the moment came, it came in silence. No alarm. No scream. Just a note. From Ginny. Folded once. No wax. No name. But Harry knew it was hers. Under the pipes. He waits. But the rhythm is not his. Not yet. G. He didn't hesitate. Ron followed, pale but steady. Professor Lockhart tried to stop them, then failed, as expected. And the entrance to the chamber, hidden inside Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, opened not with force, but with language. Parseltongue. The same way a good pass opens a play, are not by force, but by recognition. The descent was worse than expected. The tunnel spiraled downward like the grooves of an ancient vinyl record, each layer pressing closer to something old, buried, intentional. As they stepped out into the vast echoing stone chamber, Harry saw it. Not the basilisk. Not yet. The court. It wasn't a basketball court, not exactly. But it had structure. Arches formed 3 concentric lanes, like the circles of an old spell diagram. Pillars rose at key positions, wing, elbow, top of the key. And at the center, beneath the massive statue of Salazar Slytherin himself, was a circular depression in the floor. A keyhole for movement. Harry stepped into the center. He closed his eyes. And breathed. Once. Twice. The enchanted basketball in his satchel, still with him after all this time, began to warm. He set it down. And it rolled. Not randomly. In a pattern. Bounce. Curve. Stop. He followed. Each bounce aligned with a rune etched into the floor. Faint, nearly erased by centuries of damp and silence, but still there. A dribble sequence. A ritual. And then, the chamber opened. The basilisk hissed from the far end, its body emerging like a question uncoiled. Huge. Terrible. Eyes burning with unnatural venom. Ron shouted something. Lockhart fainted. Harry didn't move. He looked down. At the sequence beneath him. Bounce. Pivot. Cat. Step back. Fade. He'd seen it before. In Jordan's movements. In the Hall of Statues. In the way Hermione held her wand when preparing a spell with tempo. It wasn't just a spell. It was a play. The basilisk struck. Harry moved. Not just to dodge. He moved with form. The ball rolled into the center. He touched it. Let it guide him. Slide left. Anchor back. Cast. The spell missed, but the movement was correct. Each dodge, each roll, each turn, he wasn't reacting anymore. He was running the set. When Fawkes arrived with the sorting hat, it didn't feel random. It felt like a substitution. Harry reached in. Pulled the sword. No hesitation. His feet still danced the path of the runes. He was a player inside a living diagram. And when the basilisk lunged, fade away, swing, step through, and the blade sank deep. Silence returned. The basilisk collapsed like a closing parenthesis. Harry stood in the center of the court, panting. Around him, the lines began to glow. Not in gold. Not in red. But in white. Reset. The court had been tainted. But not broken. As he cradled Ginny's unconscious form, the enchanted ball rolled to his side and rested quietly against his shoe. From high above, in Chicago, Jordan hit a fadeaway jumper to seal a win in late April. The camera cut to Phil Jackson. He didn't smile. He simply said, "He's back in sync." Back in the chamber, Harry looked at the sword, the statue, the ball, the runes. This wasn't just about defeating evil. It was about reclaiming a space. Restoring emotion. And deep in the stone, the court whispered, "You ran it well, number 23. Ginny was recovering. Slowly. The hospital wing stayed quiet, save for the rustling of Madame Pomfrey's potions and the murmured worry of Mrs. Weasley. Ron barely left her side. But Harry? Harry found himself wondering. Not because he didn't care. Because he couldn't stop feeling it. That hum. That undercurrent in the stone. The way the castle breathed, as if a long-held pressure had finally released. But deep down, beneath the joy of Ginny's return, beneath the celebrations in the common rooms, Harry knew. The play hadn't ended. It had simply gone silent. He returned to the Hall of Statues on the third night after the chamber was sealed. The glow was gone. The runes had faded. But the positions, still there. Unchanged. He stood in the center again, where the final pass would land, and closed his eyes. And this time, when he breathed, he didn't summon the stone. He summoned the motion. Step. Shift. Slide. Pivot. Not casting. Not even practicing. Just remembering. And then, the dream returned. But this one was different. It didn't begin on the court. It began in the locker room. He sat beside Jordan, who laced his shoes slowly. No words. Just rhythm, the soft snap of leather, the pull of laces, the squeak of soles touching wood. Jordan stood. He walked to a chalkboard on the far wall. Drew a triangle. 3 points. Then, one arrow, not toward the hoop. Toward the baseline. He turned to Harry. Still didn't speak. Just nodded once. And vanished. When Harry woke, the enchanted basketball was glowing in the pre-dawn gloom. He touched it gently. This time, the rune wasn't a movement or a number. It was a diagram. 3 points. 1 cut. A triangle inside a loop. He didn't know it yet, but halfway across the world, that same diagram hung in the Bulls film room. Phil Jackson had just redrawn it. Jordan had just run it. And the team had just snapped back into sync. The next few days passed quietly. The school slowly healed. Hermione recovered with a groggy smile and 1,000 questions. Lockhart was gone, for good this time. The professors breathed easier. But Harry, walking slowly through the empty court after hours, noticed one last detail. The statue of the cloak player, arms folded, face hidden, now bore a new rune. One he'd never seen before. A circle within a circle. With a 23 at its center. He touched it. And for just a second, he felt it again. The lights of the stadium. The bounce of the ball. The crowd's breath. And Jordan, just being there. Watching. Nodding. Passing the plan, without a word. The chamber had closed. But the season wasn't over. Not for the Bulls. Not for the boy who moved differently. The days after the chamber incident felt like overtime. Officially, the game was over, Ginny was safe, the monster slain, the school reopening. But Harry couldn't let it go. not just because of what he'd seen, but because of how it had moved. He kept thinking about the way the basilisk had struck. Not wildly, not mindlessly, but according to pattern. The pauses. The corners it favored. The turns it made in the tunnels. It hadn't been attacking randomly. It had been running a play. Hermione was the first to say it out loud. They sat in the library again, warm sunlight pouring over books they hadn't touched since the autumn before. Her fingers traced the edge of an old dueling formation diagram while Harry unrolled a sketch of the chamber's rune path. The basilisk moved like a defender with a reed, she murmured. It closed lanes. Anticipated. Like it had instinct. Harry asked. No, she said. Like it had a coach. Tom Riddle's diary had been destroyed, but his memory lingered. Not in echoes or ghosts, but in structure. In the way the chamber was shaped. The way it responded to footfall. The way it coiled not in fear, but in strategy. Harry looked down at the stone, now cool in his pocket. He pressed it once. This time, it showed him not a rune, but a path. A winding motion diagram. Lanes closing. Angles shrinking. Traps forming. A defensive press. Harry understood now. The basilisk hadn't just guarded the chamber. It had run it like a half-court defense. And Riddle had called the plays. That night, in dream space, the court returned. Not the real one. The one beneath the memory. It shimmered with runes and soft white light. Jordan stood at the top of the key. He didn't dribble. He waited. Harry joined him. Jordan motioned to the wing. Harry moved there. A defender, a shadow, pressed. Jordan passed the ball without looking. Harry caught it, off balance, and drove. The shadow collapsed. Jordan's voice, quiet as breath, cut through the silence. When pressure builds, pivot. Don't push through. Shift. Harry stopped. Step back. Swung left. The shadow passed by him, just like the basilisk had. And the lane cleared. When he woke, he felt it, not fear, not pressure. Composure. That was the lesson. Not brute force. Not confrontation. But movement within pressure. The same way the Bulls handled a double team, not by driving through it, but by shifting the geometry. The same way Jordan slid through two defenders without touching either one. The same way magic could echo motion when used at the right time, in the right way. Back in the Hall of Statues, Harry traced the same defensive path the basilisk had taken underground. He mapped it not in chalk this time, but in steps. And as he moved, the statues glowed again, blue this time. Not alarm. Not threat. Recognition. He was no longer being watched. He was being acknowledged. As a player who had seen the playbook, and survived it. In Chicago, Jordan practiced quietly after hours. A new formation was being tested. Not just isolation plays. Cuts. Screens. Balance. The triangle was being polished. Each motion designed not to dominate, but to respond. Like the basilisk's coil, but controlled. Phil Jackson watched and smiled. Even monsters have angles, he said. Back at Hogwarts, Harry closed the diagram. The stone warmed once, then dimmed. Not because the play was over, but because the player had learned it. And next time? He'd be the one drawing the motion. It wasn't over. Not really. The chamber had been sealed. Ginny was safe. Dumbledore had returned. Exams were cancelled, and Hogwarts began to hum again with cautious celebration. But for Harry, something deeper had shifted. He'd run a play through darkness. He'd felt death close in. And survived not by outpowering it, but but by outmoving it. Still, one question haunted him. Why did it move like that? He returned to the court beneath the statues one final time before summer. Not to train. To reenact. To remember. He moved step by step through the basilisk strikes, every twist of the body, every lunge, every withdrawal. It hadn't been rage. It had been rhythm. Like a set defense reacting to motion. Every coil mirrored a counter. Every burst came after a pause. It had been a defender, not just a monster. Trained, intentionally or not, to read motion like a playbook. Harry placed the enchanted ball at the mouth of the corridor and ran the sequence again. This time, he chose the angles. And the shadow in his memory missed every block. That night, in his dream, the stadium lights glowed low. Jordan stood mid-court, alone. But he wasn't dribbling. He stood at the free throw line, eyes closed, arms slack. Harry stepped up beside him. Jordan opened his eyes and spoke, finally. You don't need to see the hoop. He took one slow dribble. Raised the ball. And without jumping. Fade away. It arced backward, slow and elegant, over an invisible defender. Nothing but net. Jordan didn't look back. The trick, he said, is knowing when to step back, so you can move forward. Harry woke and smiled. Not because he understood everything, but because he finally felt ready. The last day of term came with golden sun and slow footsteps down to the train. Hermione was herself again, though her bag was even heavier than usual. Ron grumbled about food and siblings. Ginny said very little, but Harry noticed she no longer looked over her shoulder. And Harry? He looked back at the castle, not with fear. With respect. Because he knew now, magic didn't come from spells alone. It came from movement. From stillness inside motion. From reading the floor beneath you, and letting instinct become intention. Far away in Chicago, Game 5 of the NBA Finals ticked into its final minutes. The Suns pressed high. Jordan pulled up. Step left. Defender jumped. Fade away. Hit. Timeout. Crowd roared. Jordan didn't pump his fist. He walked back down the court, already adjusting for the next sequence. Because the next play always matters more than the last. And somewhere, deep in the folds of a sleeping school's foundation, the court of motion pulsed once. Acknowledging not victory, but readiness. Victory doesn't arrive all at once. Not in magic. Not in sport. It settles in slowly, like dust catching late sunlight. It lingers in the corners of rooms, the arches of hallways. It takes shape in things not happening, the lack of fear in Ginny's voice, the way Hermione stands taller than before, the ease with which Ron cracks jokes again, like the pressure's finally gone. But for Harry, it doesn't feel like a triumph. It feels like resolution. Like the echo of the final buzzer after a hard-fought win. The sound that says, you did it. And now you rest. The court of motion slept again. He could still feel its pull if he focused. Still walk its lines in dreams. But the urgency had faded. It was no longer calling for him to move, it was remembering him. That meant more than he expected. The enchanted ball had cooled. The ring on his finger felt like part of him now. The stone in his pouch no longer pulsed, but it was whole, unmarred by cracks. The magic hadn't left. It had simply settled into place. The Hogwarts Express clattered over rails, windows half down, voices rising and falling in sleepy waves. Across from him, Ron dozed. Hermione reread her notes for next year's coursework, already planning a return. Ginny sat nearest the window, watching the countryside blur past. Harry leaned back, closed his eyes, and saw the stadium again. Game 6. June 20th, 1993. Bulls vs. Suns. Jordan, tireless, having played nearly the whole game. No theatrics. No celebration yet. Just composure. He dribbled past the half court. Looked left. Passed. Got it back. Pivoted. Defender lunged. Step back. Fade away. Swish. Phil Jackson didn't move. He just watched. The crowd roared like a tide. The third title in a row, the first three-peat. Harry stirred in his seat. Not because of the noise in the dream, but because of the quiet that followed. A kind of peace, as if the court itself had exhaled. He opened his eyes. They were nearly back in London. Later that summer, back at Privet Drive, Harry returned to old routines. Sort of. He still helped in the garden. Still got Ho in the wood. And Michael Jordan waiting near the sideline. Harry never spoke in those dreams. He didn't need to. Jordan would pass him the ball, clean, smooth, without instruction. Harry would catch it, breathe once, then begin. The pattern was always different. Sometimes it was a play he'd seen in the Hall of Statues. Other times, something new. But it always ended the same way. Jordan nodding. Not in approval. In recognition. Like a teammate. One evening in July, as the sun fell behind the row houses of Little Whinging, Harry found himself in the park alone. There was a cracked half-court there, barely used. The lines faded. The net torn. But Harry stepped onto it anyway. Closed his eyes. Dribbled once. Let his feet move not with memory, but with instinct. Slide. Plant. Step back. Pivot left. Shoot. Imaginary ball. Imaginary hoop. But in his mind, it hit nothing but air. And settled clean. Later that night, he dreamed again. But this time, the court wasn't empty. The bleachers were full. Not roaring. Watching. And in the center, Phil Jackson stood, arms folded. Jordan walked to midcourt. He looked at Harry. Smiled. Tossed him the ball. Season 3, he said. Let's run it again. Far away, in the waking world, Harry stirred. A breeze lifted the curtain in his bedroom. And somewhere, folded neatly beneath his bed, the enchanted ball pulsed once. Just once. A heartbeat. A call. Not to action. To readiness. End of year 2. There are many ways a story can begin. A letter. A lightning scar. A door that doesn't lead where it used to. But for Harry Potter, in the retelling that we now carry with us, there was something quieter that changed everything, something small enough to fit in a pouch, round enough to roll under a bed, and powerful enough to reframe the very concept of magic. It was a basketball. And it was never just a basketball. It was memory. It was motion. It was rhythm given form. And it was waiting. Harry's first year at Hogwarts was not defined only by spells or potions, not just by friendships or feasts or hidden threats in the forbidden corridors. No, his first year was defined by the awakening of something ancient, something coiled into the foundation of the castle itself. Something that didn't speak in words, but in motion. He discovered it beneath the floorboards. In the shimmer of a dream that took him into a locker room that didn't exist. In the bounce of a ball that somehow echoed even in memory. In the presence of Michael Jordan, no more explained than the Phoenix, no less miraculous. Jordan did not teach spells. He didn't recite lore. But he moved with meaning. And in doing so, he introduced Harry to a second school, hidden within the first. A court beneath the castle. A second rhythm beneath the rhythm. By the end of year 1, Harry had begun to feel it. To trust his feet. To interpret silence not as absence, but as potential. He'd danced through danger in the forbidden forest. He'd cut through shadow using not just courage, but coordination. And in his dreams, he'd begun to mirror greatness, slowly, humbly, but unmistakably. He was still a boy. But the court of motion had begun to know his name. Year 2 arrived heavier. The Chamber of Secrets. The whispers in the pipes. The creeping silence of fear in the hallways. Magic that twisted instead of healed. And yet, through it all, Harry kept moving. He mapped not just the castle's stones, but its rhythmic pressure points. He charted not just spells, but plays. He watched Ginny suffer, Hermione fall, Ron waver, and moved through each trial as if stepping through the tightest defensive press. Not alone, but aware. Because now, he didn't just sense the court. He understood its language. He saw that even the darkest magic had formation. That even the basilisk followed angles. And that even memory, when coiled tightly enough, could look like strategy. The chamber had not been random. It had been a set piece. Designed to trap. And he had broken it. Not with force, but with flow. 2 years. 2 seasons. 2 titles for the Bulls. And for Harry? 2 transformations. The boy who once wondered if he belonged in the magical world now understood that magic wasn't about belonging at all. It was about recognizing movement in silence. And trusting yourself to step into it. He no longer needed the enchanted ball to feel the call of the court. Because he'd become part of the system now. Not a pawn. A player. And the real season? That was still ahead. What began as whispers in stone has grown louder, clearer, and more composed. 2 years into his journey, Harry Potter has not just survived the dangers of his world, he's begun to understand its rhythm. To sense the deeper currents beneath spells and staircases. The way timing, instinct, and awareness can be as powerful as any wand. And somewhere between the rustling pages of ancient books and the creak of castle floorboards, he's become something else. A reader of the court. He doesn't only move through Hogwarts anymore. He interprets it. He anticipates it. And when danger closes in, not with a bang, but a breath, he's no longer surprised. He's already pivoted. That's what legacy looks like. It's not the big moments that define you. It's how you move in the quiet ones. The still seconds between danger and decision. The step before the shot. The court is quiet now. But it's waiting. And year 3 is already warming up in the wings. If you're still listening, if you've drifted with us all the way here to the quiet edges of the chapter, let me know you're part of this story. Drop a like or, in the comments, or let me know what moment hit hardest for you. And if this story helped you sleep, or dream, or just breathe a little slower tonight, like the video, it helps keep this series flowing. You can find part 3, or the full playlist, in the description, or head to my channel to start from the beginning. There's so much more to come. And if you haven't yet, check out my other Harry Potter sleep series, including Harry's private diary entries across all 7 books, and a lore podcast with over 100 hours of magical history and fan fiction to drift off to. Until next time. Rest well. And remember, even the quietest footsteps can change the game.